Welcome to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph, Ontario, Canada, and on podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor, and all the other major platforms. My name is Paul Smith. I'm one of the hosts of Food Farm Talk. Emily Duncan and Abdul Rahim Abdullah are the others. Please follow the podcast and our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook feeds. Today we have the second of 4 episodes featuring a discussion with business management guru Roger Martin about his thoughts about how ideas from his book, When More Is Not Better, apply to agriculture at the virtual Midwest Cover Crop Council Conference on February 24th, 2021. These were made available courtesy of Soils at Guelph. This episode has Roger Martin in conversation with Mel Luymes.
I love the way that you explained how we think in models and the model of the economy as a machine or as a natural system. Could you explain that a little bit more for us and what implications that has to shifting that way of thinking to a natural system?
What I think has happened over the past kind of half century is we've sort of dialed in on kind of a model of the economy and businesses in the economy as sort of machines, right? And a machine, let's take the car as a machine. The car is a complicated machine. There are many parts to the car. There's a drivetrain, there's a power source, there's a braking system, there's a safety system, there's an entertainment system, all of these things. And we say, well, what you can do is break that down and send off to the braking engineers, that problem, and the powertrain people another problem, the entertainment people another problem, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning another. And they can each optimize, and then we can stick it back together, and voila, it's a car. And in that car, you kind of know cause and effect. If you press on the gas pedal, it goes faster. If you press on the brake, it goes low. If you turn up the heat, the ambient temperature goes up. We've treated the economy that way. And you'll hear economists on TV. I'm an economist, so I can sort of be bad about economists. Economists on TV saying, "Whoa, the $600 billion stimulus package will produce this kind of economic growth." And then now most people they ignore it because it's sort of like dull and boring. But if you actually went back and checked, you'd find that they're virtually always wrong. And it's because the economy is more like a jungle than a car, like a natural system. It's sort of hard to tell where if you push here, right, it'll have this effect, or will it have this one or this one or this one? And that's I think a more realistic model of a complex system. So by system, it means all the pieces actually fit together and you can't disassemble them and reassemble them. They operate as a system. It's complex. You can't tell what causes what other thing exactly. And it's adaptive, right? So in a jungle, if a big tree grows, the trees behind it kind of grow on angles to try and get some sunlight. The system adapts constantly. And that's how I think we should think about the economy. And if we thought that way, we wouldn't try these grand master strokes to say we're going to fix the economy by pulling this lever. We would say it's a delicate system that we've got to treat with respect, and we tweak it. We try things and tweak it. Don't take vast, bold action, and keep on readjusting. And that's why I want legislation to be tweaked, because the minute you put legislation in place, people adapt to it. And again, it gets gamed
Yes.
by people who have very narrow interests. So legislation is supposed to be broad, benefiting the many, and the few come in and say, how can we manipulate this for our own purposes, and often undermine the intended effect of the legislation. So if we have a model of a machine, it's very sneaky. If we have a model of a machine, we just don't assume that's going to happen, Cars don't game you and say, "Oh, I know when you push my gas pedal, you think I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do that." It's just the car just does its thing because it's just a machine.
Yeah.
And I again, you are the expert, not me, on farms and fields, but I suspect every farmer understands it's a complex system. You can know some things, but you can't know them with exactitude and certainty. And sometimes things happen that you'd be surprised at. And that's how we have to treat it. It's a natural system that you can respect, be careful with, tweak, but not take massive action thinking that you can change everything the way you want to change it with no negative impact. We can kill a bunch of weeds with DDT, but oops. I guess if you don't want any birds, that'll work out just fine. But nobody who developed DDT and wanted to use DDT said, I want to get rid of all birds of prey. It was just one of those things. Yeah, one of those things that happened.
Would you say?
And again, this gets back to the education system. Unfortunately, to too great an extent, the education system teaches that there is a correct answer.
Yeah.
Right. There are very few correct answers. They're just better ones and worse ones, and even our best ones change over time. Like we used to think for over a century that Sir Isaac Newton had physics exactly figured out. That's physics, man. Like it's science. It's the way the world works, And now we would say he had it mainly right, right?
Right.
But why do we teach it as if it's right? Why do we teach kids that what they should be doing is searching for the right answer? And if it's the right answer, it'll get a red check mark, and if it's not the right answer, it'll get a red X. We're teaching them about a world that does not exist. Full stop. We teach them a world that doesn't exist. And what we teach them is to break that world into narrow, manageable chunks, more easily manageable chunks, and seek the right answer in each manageable chunk and then add them up. So it should be no surprise that you would say that that's the reaction that you get from it. Just tell me exactly what cover crop. Tell me the right answer, Mel. You're smart. Tell me the right answer.
Right.
We should not be teaching children that they are seeking the right answer. We should tell them that they're in an endless quest for better answers, and that whatever answer they think is most right today, chances are it will be superseded by a better still answer. Now, some people tell me, wow, that's a pessimistic view of the world, Roger. There are no right answers and they're all going to be wrong. And I say, boy, I mean, that in and of itself is kind of interesting. I said, what you are is incredibly optimistic about the present and unbelievably pessimistic about the future. There will never be a better answer. I am perhaps pessimistic about the present, but guess what I'm massively optimistic about? We're going to get better and better and better answers. I'll take that kind of optimism over the kind that's perpetrated now. So one of my views of educators is we just got to we as educators, what we've got to do is stop reducing into little silos and saying you can get perfect answers in little silos. Instead, we've got to teach people system dynamics. And kids can learn this. Kids can learn about ecosystems. Kids can learn about seeking better answers, but they won't if we teach them the opposite.
Yeah, and in many ways, it feels like our education system, I think you said this, is more of an unlearning of how to do this. I love, and this was a previous book you'd written, the Opposable Mind, and again with Jennifer Riel, Creating Great Choices. I love them. This is really integrative thinking is not just for businesses. I found it, like, even for my own personal life, is such great tools. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean by integrative thinking? And I think this is something that we can use in agriculture. To me, it's the heart of all the solutions that you bring up, is a new way of seeing. If you've got a choice between A and B, what do you say?
Yeah, if you have a choice between A and B and you absolutely love A and think B is a bad idea, choose A. However, if you're facing A and B and you don't really like either A or B, and every time you say, I'm going to choose A, you're saying, oh, but I will not get the things I like of B. And every time you choose B, then rather than accepting the wisdom you've been taught, which is, oh, this is the time to be tough and make that decision. I know it's hard, make that decision. That is the way of the universe telling you, don't decide. Don't decide, but now it's time to step back and ask the question, what is it about A and what is it about B that I would love to figure out how to, in a novel new way, combine into a C that's better than both, that contains elements of each, but it's better than both. It's a fundamentally different way of making decisions. It's saying, don't. When there is no great choice, don't make it. And the interesting thing, Mel, is that you can teach this technique to kids. Now we've done it successfully with kids as young as kindergarten.
Wow.
And I hate to tell you this, but they're better at it than graduate students. And it's because by the time they get to be graduate students, they are absolutely convinced that they have to make either or choices, and that's a badge of honor. If the kids, you just tell them, hey, we're going to create a better answer. Here's the two. Here's the best we got now. And they're like, ooh, boo, boo, I don't like that. Okay, here's the method for creating a better one. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds can do it and do it with enthusiasm. So I believe, and we've got a great initiative. If anybody wants to go online and look at it, it's called the I Think Initiative. That in the various Ontario school boards, Toronto, Hamilton, Halton, up in Ottawa, we are teaching teachers how to do this. The teachers love it. The students absolutely love it. And that's the kind of thing we've got to do to modify education. All the content we teach is just fine, kind of, but we've got to teach students a different way to think about the content that they're learning. I literally would want them to say, whatever Isaac Newton said or Albert Einstein said is the absolute best answer we've been able to come up with yet. But am I calling it the truth? Nope. It's the best answer we got yet. And maybe, some smart, way smarter than me, physics student will figure out a better still answer.
Mm-hmm. It really was, and I'd encourage everyone to look at this book too. It really was exercises we can do. It's almost like the rules your mind can use to break from the rules.
Yes.
That your mind makes. In this is how to get yourself out of your own way of thinking, is first being able to look at your own current way of seeing the world and then transcend it in a sense by asking these questions. Instead of disagreeing, what in that person's perspective am I missing?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you're referring to is and this is too big a word or concept for a guy from Wallenstein. They call that metacognition. I just call it sensible, but the idea would be your view of you in the world is, I have a view worth hearing, but I might be missing something.
Yes.
See, I don't want people to go around saying, "Oh, what do you think? What do you think? What do you?" As if they don't have a view. But I also don't want them to going around the world saying, "I'm right. I'm right. I'm right." So I want the mix of the two, which is I have a view worth hearing, but I might be missing something. The fact that you say to yourself, I might be missing something means that, Mel, if you say something that I'm like, what? That's not how I think. Rather than saying, Mel, what the hell are you thinking? That's wrong. My first reaction is, Mel, can you just say more? Like, just tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking. That would be the natural thing, and then you'll explain it away, and I'll say, oh, okay. I may not buy everything all the conclusions Mel has come to, but she's thinking about this thing that never even occurred to me. Now, if I add that into my way of thinking, maybe I'm improved. And it all is opened up by simply having that stance. I have a view worth hearing, but I might be missing something. Yeah. Now, some people say to me, yes, but if I'm that way, then other people are not that way. They'll just roll all over me. And the good thing about human beings is they're reciprocal. So I swear, even if you don't have that in your mind, if I'm like, Mel, say more, what do you mean by that? Tell me some more. And then I say to you, Mel, here's what I've been thinking. You'll listen really carefully to me. Why? Because I've just listened carefully to you. People are reciprocal. That's a human condition.
And I see that's really transformative. Like, ultimately, we are talking about the economic system, but it really does boil down to every individual. Like you say, this is an individual challenge that all of us can take on, to kind of have integrative thinking, and just create a lot more curiosity. But I want to bring it back to agriculture. A typical, I've heard this a bunch from farmers, that as if these were choice A or B, is save the soil, lose the farm. So you either have to save the soil or save the farm. How do you see that A and B choice playing out?
I would do the exercises that we point out in Creating Great Choices, which is to say, hey, save the soil and save the farm are kind of very high level summary abstractions. And at that level, they sound like they are completely incompatible, like completely incompatible. So let's just dive below that. And how exactly does save the farm work? What does that model look like? Okay. And I say, let's fall in love with that. Let's say I'm excited about saving the farm. What are all the cool things about saving the farm? So even if I think save the soil is the thing I care about most in life, I have to drop that for a minute and say, save the farm. Yes. Then I go over to save the soil and say, well, how does that whole save the soil thing work? And from my experience, Mel, it has never failed that if you do that exercise to say, how do those two models work, you'll come up with a better model than save the soil or save the farm. And I'm not knowledgeable enough about either the soil or the farm. I mean, I came from farm country, but we sold feed to farmers rather than farm. So I'm not enough of an expert to know what the answer would be. But I would say, Mel, if you and a group of people who understand something about farms and something about soil did that exercise, you'd come up with a better answer.
Yeah, no, it's a transformative way of thinking for sure. We'll hear from Dan later in the panel, but Dan Petker's got a great example that I brought up to you on our call last week about, he had a long-term rental. He was growing cover crops. He had a written lease. He was doing all the right things that we're trying to get farmers to do, all the best practices, but just got outbid by the neighbor that can just pay a little bit more because for who knows what reason, but they go back, they got rid of the cover crops, plowed it all up, and it kind of it destroyed the insurance that Dan was creating, in a sense, on that field. How do we move this ahead when we can so easily undermine each other as individuals in a competitive place on the farm?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think of it in the following way, which is that, you have to figure out, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a superior model, or a model that has bad logic to it, right? So if it's actually a superior model that you can, on a long-term basis, make more money getting rid of the cover crops and damaging the soil, then we have a fundamental problem, right? Because the economics are going to prevail over time, if that is superior economically over the long run, right? But if the case is actually over the long run, with the cost of money figured in an intelligent way, so discounted, if the sort of the discounted cash flow from that is better with Dan's careful management, kind of then I think the real challenge is information and making the case, because the case is a winning case. And so in this case, right, the missing element in it is the knowledge of the person leasing the land. Because I didn't hear you say selling the land.
No.
I heard you say leasing the land.
Yeah.
And so somebody who owns that land, if the thesis is correct that the NPV is actually negative compared to of the tilling it up, as opposed to doing the sensible kind of utilization of cover crops, then the person who's going to be left holding the bag is not the outbidding farmer, because they can kind of head off to the hills after having made short-term money and essentially damaged the economic life of the lessor. And so I would be trying to make sure that people leasing their land kind of understand the economics of that. That's where I would go to. I would not try to stop the guy from bidding. I would be trying to give the lessor the best data you can give him or her about what the cost, the all-in cost of leasing to that person rather than leasing to Dan.
Do you think there should be some sort of a threshold, like we will not go below this level for sustainability? So if it's regulation, or what could it look like? As we know, people game the system, right? So
yeah, it kind of depends, kind of, Mel. What I'd be trying to do is, if you can make that economic case, and you can get that case in front of, like, if Dan had that sort of a relatively kind of ironclad economic case that he could take to the lessor to say, here's the true NPV of your choice. Your choice with me is I'm going to pay you less because I can't afford to pay you kind of more, but I'm going to return to you at the end of this lease land that is worth more. And so if you take that into account, and if you lease it to this guy, this is what you will get back, and it's worse for you. That would be my first line of defense. I would be trying to equip people on that. If that just didn't work, and you were, risking creating a, prairie-style dust bowl, whatever, 100 years later, or more, I guess it was. It's 100 years later. I would say it might be time for some kind of zoning type legislation, because I mean, in cities, the zoning is pretty damn draconian, right? Yeah. You can't build closer to the side, all of that stuff. So it's not as though in manners of real estate there isn't zoning that is designed for the greater good. as opposed to the individual who happens to have that piece of land. It'd be much better for that individual to be able to build right out to the edges of it and as high as they want. And you say, sorry, that's not the greater good. So I'm not at all adverse to greater good arguments, but I tend to try and put them in behind kind of market-based systems. And what and will it work out perfectly? No, but if Dan was able to have the ironclad facts to be able to present to the farmer, and the farmer chooses to depreciate his or her land, I wouldn't necessarily say I have to stop that, because it has a benefit, which is a demonstration project, so that you can then study that and say, and here's how much he lost by leasing his land or her land to this guy instead of Dan. And you have to play the long game on these things, and not be too distracted by a short game aspect, even though it's painful to watch.
Well, yeah, and definitely farmers can understand that it is a long game, but ultimately it's a long war and really short battles every year.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. We've only got just a few minutes left, so I wanted to just leave on a really hopeful note. And I guess I just wanted to ask, like, what was behind this book? It is like ultimately really hopeful, and what makes you so hopeful, and why did you write it?
Well, I wrote it because I'm a hopeful guy. I always am. I think that for one reason or another, the world at various points in times falls prey to models that feel logical in some narrow sense, but in a broader, more holistic sense, are just kind of bad models. And I guess I see the great leap forward that we can make by making our models more sensible, right? And so that's why I'm always optimistic. I mean, there was a time not that long ago, Mel, that you couldn't vote because we couldn't trust women to vote, right? That was a model. The frailer sex, the frail sex, is not capable of voting. Well, that's a model, and there's some logic behind it. It's like, well, they're different than men, and and men run things, and like there's all these things, and then kind of somebody comes along and says, "I'm gonna really." How's about we look at it in this broader way, and then like a proverbial switch gets flipped, and you're in a very much better position. I think we go through this all the time in humanity, where we just have bad models. Hey, there's a big thing there called Lake Erie. Why don't we use that to dump all our garbage in?
Yeah.
Right. That was a model. Just flow the sewage right in there. And then all the fish die. And then we got a model that says, you know what? If we kind of took care of the area around Lake Erie, maybe this thing would come back to life. And sure enough, we have a vibrant Lake Erie. So that underscores my confidence. Bad models need to be tackled and replaced with superior models. Right, not right models, superior models, and then superior models and superior models, and so that's the attempt of this book, is to say, you know what, this model that we've been using is not producing the outcomes we think it should, and I want to provide the world with a better model, and I sort of think I've taken that on for one reason or another.
Thanks for listening to Food Farm Talk on 93.3 FM CFRU in Guelph, or on podcast. Please check our podcast show notes and social media for links to Roger Martin's work, the Midwest Cover Crop Council, and Soils at Guelph at the University of Guelph. A special thanks to Cam Ogilvy of Soils at Guelph for making these audio files available from this lecture. Please tune in again for another topical episode.